Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 64 of Untold Evidence. Today, we're going to be meandering around Alaska. And again, we're going back in time. We are starting our journey on November the 17th, 1989. The crew of a Japan Airlines cargo jumbo jet reported being followed across the Alaskan sky by an object they say dwarfed their own aircraft. We go back. A Japan Airlines cargo jet said they were with an aircraft that dwarfed them. Now, what makes this case different is not the sighting, it is the man at the Federal Aviation Administration who handled the data afterwards, and who later said on the record that he was told the event never happened. His name is James Callahan, and he kept a copy. The Japan Airlines Flight 1628 was a Boeing 747 cargo aircraft. That's a big boy. On November the 17th, 1986, it was flying a route from Paris to Tokyo, carrying a load of wine, with a refueling stop planned at Anchorage, Alaska. The aircraft was over eastern Alaska in the early evening darkness when the crew first noticed the lights off to their left. The captain, Kenju Terauchi, was an experienced pilot with thousands of hours. At first, the crew assumed the lights were a military aircraft, again, a sensible conclusion. The lights stayed with them, and according to the pilot's own account, they moved directly in front of the aircraft. He described two craft, and then later, in the encounter, a single enormous object. He estimated it was vast, comparing its size to that of an aircraft carrier, far, far larger than his own 747. The crew reported the encounter to air traffic control at Anchorage, and air traffic controllers then began working the situation. Now, this is where the case stops being only a pilot story. According to the accounts that emerged afterwards, the JAL crew's onboard weather radar showed a return in the position where they were seeing the object, and critically, controllers on the ground reported that they were also seeing intermittent returns near the aircraft on their own equipment. Anchorage Control took the situation seriously enough to take real action. They offered the JAL flight course changes, and they asked a nearby United States airline flight and a military aircraft to visually check the JAL plane as they passed. By the time those other aircraft were in position, whatever had been there was no longer visible to them, and the flight continued and landed safely at Anchorage. The captain reported the encounter formally, and that report, plus the air traffic control data, plus the radar question, landed on the desk of the FAA. At the time, John Callahan was the FAA's Division Chief of the Accidents and Investigations Branch. The JAL 1628 case came directly to him. And years later, Callahan went public with his account of what happened next. He said that the FAA gathered the data, the radar information, and the voice recordings, and that a briefing was held in Washington. He stated that the representatives of the CIA and the FBI, along with others, attended the briefing. And he goes on to say, at the end of the meeting, those present were told that the event was not to be discussed, that the meeting had never happened, and that the data was, in effect, to disappear. But Callahan said that he had kept the original data, the recordings, the radar information. He stated he had held on to them decades later, and in 2001, he was one of the figures who came forward as part of a public push for UFO disclosure, presenting his account and his materials. A senior FAA official on the record saying the data was suppressed and he kept a copy. Now that is what makes a JAL 1622 just so bizarre. Now the conventional case, which is substantial and must be given its weight. First, the FFA's own formal conclusion. After the investigation, the FFA's official position was that the radar data was not conclusive. The agency suggested that the ground radar returns near the aircraft could have been a split radar echo, a known artifact in which a single aircraft, under certain conditions, produces a second false return on a controller scope. Now, if that is what had happened, the ground radar was not tracking a separate object, it was tracking their own plane twice. Now, second, the astronomical explanation. The scientist and UFO skeptic Philip Klass investigated the case in detail. He pointed out that on that evening, from the JAL aircraft's position and heading, the bright planet Jupiter and Mars were exactly where the crew first reported the lights. A bright planet, seen through a moving cockpit window in turbulent air, can appear to pace an aircraft and its movements. Third, the question of the giant object, the enormous craft. The aircraft carrier-size object was most clearly described by the Captain Terauchi himself. The other crew members' accounts were more limited. A single primary witness to the most extraordinary element of a case is a real weakness, however experienced that weakness is. And there's a human cost worth noting. After the captain went public with his accounts, Japanese Airlines reportedly grounded him from flying for a period of time and moved him to a desk role. Speaking openly about the encounter did not help his career. So the honest position, the conventional explanations, split radar echo and bright planets, are serious and they cover much of the case. What they do not fully dissolve is John Callahan's testimony. Klass can explain the lights. He cannot explain why a senior FAA official says he was told the meeting never happened. Now, the flight is really two cases stacked on top of each other. There is a sighting, which has a plausible, conventional explanation. And then there's the aftermath, which has a named, credentialed, on-the-record witness saying the United States government made the data disappear. You can accept the first and still be troubled by the second. In fact, that may be the most defensible place to stand. Jupiter and Mars over Alaska, and a man at the FAA who kept the tape because he did not believe what he was told to do with it. John Callahan's public testimony is referenced in the description. Tell me in the comments which half of the case you find hardest to believe, which you agree with. Personally, it seems another one. I'm not entirely sure seasoned pilots, although this is not a military aircraft, can randomly confuse a planet in which they must see reasonably frequently with an aircraft carrier-sized object. That is not small. That seems very, very difficult. Now, I wasn't there. I've seen no videos. I am going off the evidence that we have had today. But again, I'm not completely convinced the counter-arguments match the original documentation. Although it was only one, he was a seasoned professional. James Callahan was told the meeting never happened and the data disappeared. This embodies a lot of UFO disclosure evidence. It is really difficult to decide conclusively what is real and what is not. One man against the entire US government. Where do you guys stand? Have we misrepresented anything? Have we given misinformation? Please let us know in the comments. Thank you very much for listening. This has been Untold Evidence, and we will see you in the next episode.